Trailmakers, a silly game that's been worked on for almost a decade, full of glorious bugs that both help and destroy the creations you design. Since I have nothing better to do and my channel is lacking a ton of long-form videos, I decided to give myself a little challenge. I'll be honest, I spent like 5 minutes thinking of an idea for the video before coming up with this challenge. The build challenge is simple: make a boat that can transform to fly vertically. Now I'm going to do this video in a format similar to Messier 82, aka me explaining the build process and ideas while sped up footage is playing in the background. Simple, right? I wanted to make a sort of hovercraft style propulsion system to my hybrid vehicles, so I decided to use the tail propellers. For making the props fold in and out of the vehicle and changing modes would be a cool idea, I did not think about how painful it would be to design and make functional. I spent several minutes just getting the folding to work on the props, which also had to be fixed many times later on before doing anything else. Since I like my vehicles functional, I always make sure it functions before it looks good, which usually makes all my builds horrid if I'm not motivated enough to polish them after finishing up. After the folding mechanics were done, I began to work on a front prop to balance out the thrust, which was a bit of a nightmare to do. And finally we get onto probably the longest part of the build, the logic. Because I felt fancy, I wanted the front prop to only work during the Vtol mode, which took way longer than I expected to take since I decided to add piece after piece of logic to make it all cool. But we'll get onto that later though. To make my ideas work, I decided to hook some distance sensors which were inverted into an XOR gate that also had an NOR gate hooked into it. The way it functioned is I pressed the keybind to deactivate the NOR gate, which was J, and that would allow me to use the prop when in Vtol mode. Since XOR gates only work when one output was put in, it meant that when the other props folded in and the NOR gate disabled, it would allow inputs to work. In simple terms, engines deactivated inverted sensors, NOR blocks turned them off, the control of the props work. Yippee! After I wasted time doing the logic, I decided to move on to something a lot easier, which was just making the frame and what the finished boat should look like. And I just used pontoons mostly for edges. Once I got bored of that, I noticed a very annoying problem: the wonders of friction. Basically, since engine blocks are weird, they have a lot of friction against normal blocks, so when the engine is now tucked in, they would not close up all the way, due to the blocks underneath them. It was so bad I had to rip out a chunk of the hull just to make them close. I eventually solved the issue and afterwards I continued designing the hull of the boat. All good things must come to an end, and so does the easy designing. I was now back onto the monster known as logic. While the earlier logic was a lot shorter and easier this time, I went all out with my knowledge of logic. I spent almost 25 minutes just to make the gyros have different keybinds when in different modes, and do I regret it? A little. Is it awesome? Yes. Now to explain this, I wanted the gyro to turn with A and D when in boat mode and Q and E whilst in Vtol mode. And boy was it a nightmare. At some point I started from scratch just with how much of a mess it was. The Q and E function was almost the exact same to the logic I did for the engine, but the A and D function was the tough part. To practically inverse the logic to make it work, and after about 20 minutes of torture, and finally realizing the logic gate wasn't connected to the gyro, I got it to work with no issues whatsoever, which was amazing. The A and D works by distance sensors going into an OR logic gate with negative output that went into an A and D gate that was connected to the gyro. When the keybind to change into Vtol was pressed, the NOR gate was disabled, preventing any function. Then after that whole ordeal, I did the other access for roll, which is as easy as copying the XOR gate, hooking up to the new gyro, and hooking up the NOR gate to it. Once all the important logic was done, I finished up fixing any bugs or issues and gave it a test drive to see how it went, and well, it was interesting. It took a hot minute to float, and I needed to give it more for us to work, which I did in fact use logic on again. And the boat mode was slow, but it did function pretty smoothly. Maybe if the video gets enough attention I'll make a part 2 where I beef it up and make it look nicer, but until then, this is literally all I have to give to my non-existent fanbase.